Though she was physically small, Queen Victoria's presence looms over an entire 19th century. An actual product of her time, she embraced the era's deep sentimentality and fascination with death. When she passed at 81, she left secret, meticulous instructions on how her body should be prepared and what treasures should be placed in her coffin. From hidden rings to personal mementos, the details of her burial reveal a queen who never stopped clinging to the past. Now, if you're new to the channel and enjoy the video, please leave a like, and why not subscribe? And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss any of our historical stories. So without further ado, let's take a look into the coffin of Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria held a record as Britain's longest serving monarch when she passed away. She left an indelible mark on history, defining an era while maintaining a deeply guarded personal life. Now, her life had been filled with duty, love, and no shortage of controversy, particularly regarding the people she held closest. Her 9 children, often at odds with her personal choices, had little patience for some of the relationships that she most cherished. So when planning her funeral, Victoria knew secrecy was essential if her wishes were to be honoured. She dictated 12 pages of precise instructions to her secretary and chief lady-in-waiting, who then hand-delivered them to her physician, Sir James Reed. Unlike her family, Reed had been her confidant and caregiver in her final days, and indeed his was the last name she spoke before she died. Historian Tony Rennell later uncovered these secret burial instructions while researching Reed's archives. The Queen's final requests, long concealed, finally came to light. Among them an array of personal relics, some controversial, to be placed in her coffin. Reed alone ensured her wishes were fulfilled, proving that in death, as in life, Victoria defied convention to remain true to herself. One of the first unusual items on Queen Victoria's burial list was a plaster cast of Prince Albert's hand, made shortly after his death. It was a profoundly personal relic and one she had clung to in the long, grief-stricken years after losing the love of her life. Now, when Albert died suddenly at just 42, Victoria was shattered. Her mourning set the tone for an entire era, shaping the customs of grief across the Western world. But her devotion went beyond public displays of sorrow. For years she insisted that Albert's morning routine continue as if he was merely away and not gone forever. Servants brought hot water to his room, laid out his shaving brush and towels, and even selected the suit he would have worn that day. And then they quietly removed the items at night, only to repeat the ritual the following day. Victoria herself lived in a world draped in black. Her bedroom was a shrine to Albert, filled with portraits and mementos of their life together. Each night she slept with the plaster cast of his hand beside her, holding on to the memory of the man she refused to let go, even in death. In a striking blend of grief and nostalgia, Queen Victoria's secret funeral instructions decreed that everything, from the horses to the mourning attire to the funeral crepe, be white. Most notably, she insisted on being buried in the same white bridal veil she wore on her wedding day in 1840. It was a fitting tribute. As a young queen, Victoria broke tradition by wearing an entirely white gown. This choice not only set a fashion precedent, but also symbolised both purity and practicality. Now, she and Albert had entered marriage as virgins, and while history often paints her as prudish, nothing could be further from the truth. Victoria was passionate about her husband, usually prioritising their physical relationship over her royal and maternal duties. In death, her choice to return to her bridal veil speaks volumes. It was more than a piece of fabric. It symbolised the happiest relationship of her life, a hopeful gesture that she and Albert would be reunited in eternity. She clung to those memories even in life, posing for portraits in her wedding attire decades after their nuptials and forever the devoted bride. Victoria's funeral instructions were particularly delicate regarding what she wished to be placed in her coffin. While her family knew she would be buried wearing a wedding ring from Prince Albert, only her secretary and physician knew she had also requested a second ring, a ring given to her by another man. That man was John Brown, her fiercely loyal Scottish servant and confidant. Their relationship was a source of speculation, scandal and resentment among her children. Brown had first entered Victoria's life when she called him to court after Albert's death, recalling that her late husband had spoken highly of him. Over time, Brown became more than a servant. He was her closest companion, the only one who dared to challenge her, speak plainly, and offer unfiltered devotion. Historians have long debated the nature of their bond. Some, like A.N. Wilson, argue that while romantic, it was never consummated, but rumours persist that a Scottish minister secretly married them. Now, whatever the truth, Victoria's children loathed Brown, and her son King Edward VII made it his mission to erase him from history. But what Edward never knew was that his mother was laid to rest with a lock of Brown's hair, his favourite photograph, and his mother's wedding ring on her finger. A final, silent defiance. So was Queen Victoria a pack rat, a sentimental Victorian hoarder, or did she truly believe she could take cherished items to the afterlife? The answer might be all three. Her coffin, crafted to bespoke dimensions that seemed almost too large for her petite frame, was nearly finished before she was even laid to rest within it. To prepare the interior, attendants first lined the base with a layer of charcoal, an age-old method used to counteract dampness and suppress any emerging scents when embalming was rudimentary at its best. Resting atop this dark bed was a cherished token of devotion, one of Prince Albert's dressing gowns, gently arranged with reverence. The Queen's coffin became a treasure chest of memories, shawls, books, bracelets, lockets, photographs, and fresh flowers surrounded her. She was adorned with rings on every finger, bracelets on both wrists, and multiple pendants. One hand rested on the plaster cast of Albert's hand, and the other clutched John Brown's photo and a lock of his hair. And at the very least, a white bridal veil was gently draped over her, eternally the bride. Queen Victoria was buried beneath a sea of sentimental keepsakes and fresh flowers, a final tribute to a life steeped in memory and devotion. Now, though she died in the bleakness of January 1901, greenhouses across Britain and Europe provided a bounty of blooms for her funeral. Among them, her daughter-in-law, the new Queen Alexandra, placed fresh hyacinths in her coffin, though her physician, Sir James Reed, used the arrangements to conceal the secret mementos in Victoria's left hand most discreetly. But the most meaningful floral tribute came from the Queen herself. In her secret burial instructions, she requested a sprig of heather to be placed on her body, a beloved Scottish symbol. It lightly evoked cherished days spent at Balmoral Castle with her family, and perhaps more intimately, memories of the wild, untamed companionship she found with John Brown. In the end, even in death, she surrounded herself with the tokens of those that she loved. One of the most poignant items placed in Queen Victoria's coffin was a heavy, ornately embroidered cloak that had belonged to Prince Albert. More than just a relic of her beloved husband, the cloak held an even more profound significance. It had been sewn and embroidered by their daughter, Princess Alice, Albert's devoted child. Alice had been Victoria's closest companion among her 9 children, and heartbreakingly, she was also the first to die. By placing the cloak in her coffin, Victoria was not only honouring Albert, but also preserving Alice's memory, a final tribute to the 2 souls she had lost, but never stopped mourning. Queen Victoria even planned who would lift her into her final resting place. Once her doctor and secretary had carefully arranged most of the sentimental treasures that she wished to take with her, a select group of family members and servants gathered to move her body from bed to casket. Her physician, Sir James Reed, and her chief lady-in-waiting stood at her head. Along one side were her son and heir, King Edward VII, her grandson, German Kaiser Wilhelm II, and her son, Arthur, Duke of Connaught. On the other side were three of her most loyal servants. Though her coffin was already brimming with keepsakes, the Queen's petite 5-foot frame fitted neatly among them. Once lowered inside, her ladies made final adjustments with Reed's help and discreetly adding a few last tokens. After the others had left the room, Reed quietly slipped John Brown's mother's wedding ring onto Victoria's left finger and tucked his photograph and a lock of his hair into her hand. Only then was the casket sealed, Victoria's secrets intact, carried with her into eternity. Sir James Reed served as Queen Victoria's primary physician for the last 15 years of her life, earning her deep trust and devotion. Regarding her most personal final wishes, she confided in him rather than her own family, making him the guardian of her secrets. The Queen's detailed burial instructions, prepared by her secretary, still exist, kept not by the royal family, but by Reed's descendants. Now the royals have long resented this. Princess Margaret publicly confronted the Reed family, demanding, "You have something that belongs to us, give it back." But the pleas fell on deaf ears, and to this day, the list remains in the Reed archives. Victorians lived with death in a way that feels almost alien today. With short life expectancies and high mortality rates, death was ever present. Bodies were prepared at home, displayed in parlours, and even photographed as if still among the living. Mourning customs were elaborate, from black draped furniture to jewellery made of a loved one's hair. It was also the age of romanticism, where emotion, sentimentality, and even the supernatural held sway. Given this, it's no surprise that Queen Victoria's death wishes were anything but simple.